Hello and welcome to Marginal Support, where support is anything but marginal. My name is Andre Lindy, and today I have a guest who I believe I put something out on. It was a support driven, and Robert reached out to me. So, Robert, thanks for being on. Can you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
give us a short introduction about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Robert Cabral. I'm based out of New York. I've been working in the customer experience space for, I want to say 15 plus years and leading teams for most of that time. Most of my background has been in the tech SaaS startup world. And most recently, I work at a company called Runway, which is a generative AI platform. We work with film producers, gaming industries, and we are primarily image and video generation models, but we're also moving towards the robotic space as well on general world models. So really interesting stuff, especially as we start to adopt AI more and more in the support industry as well. So yeah, happy to be here and looking forward to the chat.
Thank you for coming on. One thing that you said at the very beginning is something that I've been focused on lately,
Yeah,
and that is I've noticed that a change of vocabulary for people in our space. A lot of people, even 5 years ago, would say, I work in support.
yeah,
Now, a
yeah.
lot of people are saying, I work in customer experience. What do you think is the change that we've had, that we've shifted from support operations to customer experience?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of context on my team. So I was brought in as the head of support at Runway. And back when I started, which wasn't too long ago, maybe a year and a half ago, most of my focus was on the consumer support side. And frankly, pretty straightforward. We hadn't even adopted an AI agent yet. It was more about, how can we build out the processes and the foundation and the capabilities to provide the best possible support for our customers before we even look into an AI platform. And over that time, the scope of what I've been responsible for has expanded. Now we're doing enterprise support. Now we have a team dedicated to customer education. We're also mid-market customer success is also under my team, and that is for anyone who's not familiar with that. That's kind of scaled success. So working with enterprise customers at scale. So it's a little bit of a hybrid between operations and customer success. And the reason that we made that change was partially because of all of those changes and evolution within the team. And I don't think that's isolated. To your point, I think it's happening across the industry, especially as we start to adopt more things like AI. The traditional support role is still there, but there's also many more roles opening up. So teams like your team, my team, I'm assuming are able to do things that they weren't able to do 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and that is frankly just opening up the spectrum of what the team is responsible for. And I think support for most organizations is only a piece of that, and it doesn't really encompass everything that the team is responsible for.
Yeah, I would agree. If you look at the way that we've done things in the past, AI is kind of eating a lot of our lunch. But that's not a bad thing. It's allowing people in the space to level up, learning new things. It's allowing them to see things they couldn't see before. In your time, since you've worked before AI and now during AI, what is something that you've noticed that your teams do different now because you have basically this AI assist?
Yeah, my team basically relies much more heavily on the tools that we have and the data that we have. Before, I feel like data was very much top down, or if anyone on the team was looking at any sort of data on their own time, it was like, how many tickets am I answering? What's my individual productivity? What's my CSAT compared to the rest of the team? And now you're seeing team members that are taking initiative and looking at the broader picture. What are we seeing customers report? What are their top issues? or some bugs that the team may not have found, and using AI to really surface that information. So I think the result of that is actually great because I was the bottleneck before, or other support leaders were the bottleneck before when it came to that data. And now anybody can just go in, look for this information, especially if you're a high volume organization, and identify what those themes are and actually take action. So as an organization, not just as a team, we're also taking action much more quickly. So we would rely on engineering, for example, to flag these, like, hey, we're seeing a spike here on these issues. And now somebody on my team is actually identifying those before our engineering team, which is another problem to address. It doesn't happen too often since we do have a lot of safeguards in place on the engineering side, but in the rare cases where the engineering team may not find those issues, we're getting those signals much more quickly. And it's making, to answer your question, I think it's making the team much more proactive because they're enabled to do so much more.
What has been the reaction from your engineering team when you guys start to notice things before them? Because this is, and I'm hearing from other people, is that
Yeah.
support teams are being more proactive and they're creating more tools so they can be more self-reliant. So what has been engineering's response? For traditionally, we've had to go to them and say, I need you to fix this, or I need you to set this monitoring for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial reaction is like, oh crap, this shouldn't be happening. Like, support or our customers shouldn't be noticing these things before we do. How do we actually address it? So I think the indirect impact is that it pushes the the engineering team, the product team, to do more and to be better, which is a good thing at the end of the day.
Wouldn't you say, though, in some ways that this is freeing up their time, much like how AI can free up a support person's time to focus on something that's a little more serious, a little more meaty?
Yeah.
Maybe when we're creating these tools, it's also freeing up time for product engineering that they're not getting as many interrupts, so they can focus on their work, and do something better for the product as well.
Yeah, for sure. We're, like you mentioned, we're building out our own tools at this point, whereas before we would probably have a support engineer on our team, or be very close with that one engineer that can help build things out for us. And now we're taking the lead on building out a lot of that functionality, whether it's reporting, whether it's action oriented things. And yeah, I think it does enable the rest of the organization to be a little bit faster, a little bit quicker. Um, and I think also it changes the perception a little bit, because I think in many organizations, if you just keep hearing from one person or one team, it can get a little annoying, frankly. Like, this person is just complaining or just sending issues, and now we're actually sharing solutions. Like, here's what I did to address this, or sharing more direct proposals. Like, here are the themes that we're seeing, being more data oriented in what they're requesting. So it's reducing that back and forth, in addition to allowing our team to do more. So it is freeing up more engineering time, I would say.
That's definitely good. I mean, more time for them to build something cool, astounding. You're like, wow, what is this?
Yeah.
So, a fictional New Yorker once said this line, and this was, with great power comes great responsibility.
Hmm.
And
I've heard of that one before, yeah.
I'm curious, what has been the response from the higher ups, though, when they get wind of your team starting to build these tools? Because, when we think back to maybe the Web 2.0 days where people were building crazy things here and there was really kind of a wild west in terms of how things were being built. There wasn't a lot of regulation. Do you think
Yeah.
we're entering that same phase right now, in where all these AI tools are allowing us to basically vibe code and create all these tools, but there still needs to be some compliance or regulation around these tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the answer is really going to vary from one team to the next and one organization to the next. At Runway specifically, we are an AI company. So honestly, it's kind of the expectation that everyone is taking the time to understand their part of the business and take ownership of what needs to be done to get us to where we need to be as a team, but also as an organization. So that is happening all across the organization at Runway and all across the team as well. So I think the reaction would be, if it wasn't happening from leadership, is, why is this not happening, and how can we enable the team to do more of it? So there, it really depends how risk averse your leadership team is and how many guardrails they put in place. But I think with the right guardrails and the right training, you can really enable your team and your organization to do a lot of great things, which is what I feel that we're doing right now.
Well, I certainly hope at an actual AI company they're encouraging people to actually use the tool. So I know about Runaway. I've seen it used, and it's very cool the way you can just pretty much type out a prompt and say what you want, and it creates a video for you, right?
Yep.
But what kind of hazards do you run into, though, with a company where people have freedom to basically use whatever's in their head to make a video out of it? How do we start to address this world where content creation is now pretty much available to anyone?
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely opens up a lot of possibility. And to your point, it could open up a lot of other things as well that we may not necessarily intend. But we actually have a team dedicated specifically for trust and safety. And, I can't speak to all the details there, but we have a really competent team that takes this very seriously and makes sure that we have a really safe community for our creators and beyond that.
So in your role now, as head of support, how do you get people to ramp up for a tool that, let's say a couple of years ago didn't exist, right? I mean, people knew about it, but
Sure.
mainstream, it's really been with us for a while, right? Well, not a while, but mainstream now, it's here, and everyone's still learning. Like I saw one job post where it said, requires 5 years experience in this tool, but it's only been around for 3 years,
Yeah.
which I think is
I see
hilarious.
that all the time, actually. Yeah.
How do we go about ramping people up when everyone's still learning and the tools are still evolving?
Yeah, I think the answer is less, for me at least, how much experience do you have with this particular tool or these tools, and more about what is your natural sense of curiosity? What have you built with the tools that are available to you? How autonomous are you? How inquisitive are you? And basically, how flexible are you when things continue to change? Because things are going to continue to change. What we've been able to do with the platform 2-3 years ago is completely different from what we're able to do now. What we were able to do as a team with all the tools that we have is also completely different. So it's really about finding a person that can adapt to that change, adapt quickly, and really feel extremely comfortable in that, and maybe even ideally enjoy that sort of environment and that pace of change.
That kind of curiosity. I mean, I think that's something that anyone who walks into the support role, and if they're not curious, what are you doing in this role? I've never met a support person that's not curious. So
Right.
that's something that I think we have to definitely look for in each people. I want to get back to something you said earlier, which was about the different, not tiers of support, but the different, basically bands of support for customers. Now,
Right.
when I was working tier one a while ago, right, it was, you still had your free users, your paid users, and your elite users, however you want to do it. But
Sure.
what I noticed back then was that your SMB customers were generally a little more needy, a little more, they want a lot more hand holding. How is it now when we're at a different playing field now? How are we still at that stage where enterprise customers still need a lot of hand holding, or they are much more self sufficient than your SMBs?
Yeah, I think it depends on, again, organization. For us specifically, we probably see the opposite, where SMBs are a little bit more self-sufficient. They know exactly what they want with this sort of tool, and they dive right in. Whereas when you're dealing with an enterprise organization, there's a wider range of skill sets and comfort levels when it comes to tools like Runway. And that requires a little bit more handholding and direction. And I think you just need to know your audience and adjust accordingly. We have those sorts of bands in place right now. So that mid-market role that I was referring to earlier is specifically for those SMB customers, to help them out as we continue to scale and grow that number. And we have a separate team outside of my own that manages the larger enterprise accounts that do require that extra hand-holding. And at the same time, the AI, where that enables us, the AI support, is with our customers that are either new to Runway or have those consumer accounts. But we also try to balance that as much as possible. We have a very active Discord community for the consumers. So if they do have a question and they don't want to go back and forth with an AI bot, even if it does answer their question properly, we have a very active community that can help them out. And we do also have our support team that can help out as well. So the way I think about it is more, and I think what you're implying as well, is what are those bands? How should we split these customers up? What are their needs? And how can we serve those needs through different channels and in different ways, in a way that makes sense for both the customers, but also us as a business as we continue to grow.
So you brought up one support channel that I think is very interesting, Discord, because once again, a couple of years ago, if you would have even mentioned this to anyone, you're saying, let's support Bill on Discord. They're like, are you crazy? Get out the door. Just leave right now. You think about it, we used to have the defined channels of phone, maybe live chat, and email. How do you see the channels we're supporting people change, both on the demographic and the age of the customer we're seeing nowadays?
Yeah, so Discord is actually a new support channel for me as well. Before I got here, I'd only heard of Discord for people that like to play video games and connect with other people. That was really my exposure to it. And when I got here, I was fortunate enough to come to a place where the Discord community was already established. It's actually owned outside of my organization. Timmy's our community manager, and he does a fantastic job at just building excitement, but also helping our customers when they do have those types of questions. And I think the benefit for us, it's less about the age or the demographic of the customers, and more about how collaborative our tool is and can be, and how collaborative that learning experience is and can be as well. And what we found is that people do love learning together, and they love throwing ideas off of each other. It's a creative community at its core. These are people that love to create, and love to create even before Runway existed. So having that sense of community was really important. And frankly, that could have happened in any number of ways. Discord was just one channel that we chose to do it. And it's been working really well. I think the balance of community and support and going to the right channels is still something that we're constantly gauging and really seeing, should we go more one way versus the other. But at its core, as long as we have a place for our customers, especially our newer ones, to draw inspiration from and learn from other people, not just from our team, but from the community, I think that's the real benefit there.
One thing that I remember when I was managing support and leading support teams was that we did have community message boards, but those were very limited. Usually those were gated. You had to be on the platform to log in to get to it. And now you're seeing a lot more support channels, untraditional support channels, Discord, Reddit, Twitter's. That used to be kind of big, but it's interesting now that you're having this community or this grassroots support team outside of your company forming,
right?
And they are giving lots of answers. But one thing I'd be curious, have you seen how often do you see misinformation placed in those areas where someone from your team goes in and you're like, that answer is completely wrong right there?
Yeah, so I mean, it happens sometimes, but the good thing about a tool like Runway is that when you're building something out, you can see the end result, and the end result is tangible, visible, and there are many ways to get to the same place or get the same end result. Many processes to do it. So, what I see more often is actually not necessarily misinformation, but maybe sharing of information that is a little cumbersome when there's actually a more straightforward path to get to that answer. And we just kind of have to course correct. There's internal training for us as a company. We try to make sure that our moderators have all the information that we have as well. So I think it's just more about making sure that we close that feedback loop and having that visibility for when that does happen. We can jump in and make those corrections as needed.
That's good. I think that's good that you're giving people that freedom to express themselves on the board, but then you're also kind of giving them a slight nudge. You're like, you don't have to do it that way. That's a lot harder. Why don't you just
Yeah, yeah.
try to do it this way? What is, in your time there, what has been one feature you've seen that's come from the community where maybe it's a feature request, the way that people are using the product that kind of you're just like, whoa, that is amazing. Something that you probably would have never thought of, but the way the client base, the customers are very creative in how they use it. So what is something that kind of just like, it opened your eyes like, wow, I didn't know we could even do this?
Honestly, those types of things pop up pretty regularly, and it's pretty insane to see the people push the limits of what the platform can do, or build out a different use case. And we encourage that, and we also learn from that. And a lot of times, we've actually built those workflows or those recommendations into our own tool or into our own processes. So to answer your question, it happens all the time. While we do have people that jump in and say, here's a really long workflow for doing this process, we have that one person that says, hey, you can actually do this, which is really quick. It may work maybe 50% of the time, but you can try it out and see how it goes from there. And it does help us inform the product on what we can do, what we can change, how are people using it, and how we can lean into that. So yeah, super interesting stuff. And going back to the course correction thing, that we actually have our own community jumping in and doing that for us a lot of times.
With the amount of data that you have available now, because you just sparked something in my head when you talked about the way you adopted some people's techniques and then you've given that to product. With the amount of data that comes in now, we as a support team or as customer experience can be much more robust in how we relay the usage of the platform to product. What have you seen as a shift in terms of now how we can change our narrative in terms of how people are using or aren't using the platform to try to help product shape the future of the platform?
So what basically you're asking what the shift in how we work with product is?
Well, I think it's more of now that we've always had tons of data, but we've never had a good way to really create a coherent story. Because in the past, it would take lots of number crunching. It would take, you have to grab data like these tags from one place, you have to grab tickets from this other place. Now there's plenty of tools that can aggregate that data for us and start to notice these trends that we probably never would have seen in the past.
Yeah, yeah.
So how are these, basically this ability to basically take what seemingly random data together and now make a coherent story, and how has that shaped the way that you now talk to your product team?
Yeah, that goes back to some of the tools that we're being able to build out ourselves. And I've personally built out a voice of the customer that aggregates data from multiple sources, our ticketing system, our AI chatbot, even Slack feature requests that are trickling in from other teams. And someone on my team actually built something that is more of a daily version of that. And what we're doing is using both of those. So the daily version goes out on a daily basis, and we're able to spot trends and issues right away. We have the numbers tied to it, what we're hearing from different parts of our community, whether it's in, again, ticketing, email, or our AI chatbot. And then with our weekly one, we're able to bring everything together and sort of spot these bigger trends. So when we share this information, we're not just like, here's a brain dump of information, but what are the actionable pieces here that we can tag the right people in to make some changes? So, if we're noticing a bunch of people are reporting this, and that, it's not quite a bug. It's a feature request opportunity, maybe. And then we can really explain, like, this is how we intended this feature to work initially. This is how customers are actually using it, and this is the blocker that they're going through. It may or may not result into changes, but I think what product appreciates is that they have all the information they need to make a decision. They can compare it to their own usage metrics, because product also is enabled with a ton of data themselves. And I think what that does is it just helps paint a broader, bigger picture, a more full and complete picture of what our customers are doing, what they want to accomplish. And these decisions to make product updates aren't really happening in these silos that just end up happening sometimes, even if it's not intentional.
You said one thing in there that I think is a saying that every support person has said, and we also get a small chuckle from it, probably quite a bit, in that it's not a bug, it's a feature. I mean, I've said that a lot, and sometimes that doesn't go well with customers. But yeah, I definitely agree with that. One other thing I'm kind of curious about now, and I've heard this from some other people, or a desire from other support leaders now that we have these tools available to us, what do you think about support doing their own hackathons now? In terms, now we're going to try to basically get together as a group and try to create as many crazy tools as possible, that something that we couldn't have done in the past.
I mean, we are. I wouldn't say we're doing like a hackathon per se, but what we did do at the beginning of the quarter is try to identify what are our quarterly goals. How do we accomplish that? And we actually have a goal tied to building out specific apps and tools that will help us accomplish some of those things. We're tracking pretty good towards that. And yeah, I think that is something that would have been really hard to do if you didn't have the technical team behind it, or really tight communication with product and engineering to make sure that we carve out time specifically for those things. So yeah, I mean, this is to answer your question. In a sense, we kind of are doing that, just in a more forward-looking way, instead of like, let's dedicate this week to just building things out. But there's no right or wrong way of doing it, in my opinion. I think as long as you're taking time to make sure that your team is not just working in the queues, not just answering tickets, but also thinking what kind of value can I add to the team beyond these one-to-one interactions that I'm having. That could be the use of AI, that could be something else. But the point is, I think the important point is making sure that your team feels enabled to do that, number one, and also has the resources to do those things. I don't like putting a ton of guidance on what those things are, because then it kind of limits the thinking there, and not one person has the full scope of what's going on, and I think it's really important and good to encourage that.
I mean, it sounds like you're trying not to constrain people. You're trying to give them a bit of freedom. You're trying to, let them have open access, if you will. Like, they can try to grow as they want, which I think is very important. That with that in mind, where do you see then the where we're going as support structurally. Like we said earlier, we're expanding more to CX. But where do you see the role going from here now? Because the role is fundamentally different than it was even 2, 3 years ago.
Yeah, honestly, I don't see a world where where that tier one support really exists, or if it does exist, is closer to a tier two, tier three support. And what I mean by that is what everyone is doing and or expected to do will be a whole lot more specialized. Since we're able to build these tools, we're able to build out these agents that can take care of those very simple requests that leverage documentation and things like that. So that's one thing. But I also think there's going to be an increased effort to build out sort of that operational side of support, where you are always going to have people that interact with customers, but I think you also need people or person, depending on the size of your team, to focus on how can we make these non-human interactions as good as they can be. How do I enable my tier two, tier three team to do the best work they can do and focus on this higher impact, more nuanced work that we're doing. So I don't necessarily, I know there's this fear of AI taking over jobs, and it is doing it to a certain degree with these very simple task-oriented roles, but it's also giving people the ability to grow within support or customer experience into these other more specialized roles that I honestly think are much more interesting anyway, and something that most people want to do longer term in their careers. So yeah, what it means beyond that, we'll have to wait and see. But I think this is actually where we are right now, and for the next couple of years, I just see us continuing to build on that sort of two bucket framework. There's obviously going to be a lot more nuance in those, but it's essentially those two buckets.
So as a kid, I don't know if you had this experience, but I remember as a kid we had these books that were choose your own adventure books, where you would do, then you say go to page X if you want to go to this part of the story, or go to.
Right.
I kind of feel that we're almost in that style right now with how we're shaping future support roles, because I've seen in a lot of companies now. Companies are creating these own roles basically based off of what people have done inside the company. So in some ways that it's no longer the senior manager or the directors creating these roles. It's someone in there saying, I really love doing this. How can we incorporate this into the company? I'm curious, is that what you've seen, where somebody keeps doing something over and over? You're like, that's really cool. We don't have a spot for that, but maybe we should have a spot for that.
Yeah, I think especially at these smaller organizations that I've been used to working at, that is a lot of times how these roles are created. We have people on the team that are doing specific things. Sometimes they're not even support related. And if we find enough value in it, or if the leadership team finds enough value in it, that could end up being its own role, or a move to either a different team or an expansion of the current team. So that is happening, and I think that'll continue happening. We're all still figuring things out. I think if anyone tells you they have it completely figured out with all these new changes that are happening, that it's all BS, in my opinion. But yeah, we're still figuring things out, and we're making changes as we go. And part of that is that exploration, which I think is important. It's not always going to land. And I think the important thing is, or I guess the North Star is like, what are the business needs? What are the customer needs? And how does what I'm doing or what I want to do tie to that? That's really how you can, as an individual, that's how you can build a case for those roles. And as a leader, that's how you should be assessing whether or not these types of moves actually make sense.
I think that's a great answer, just because we're being cognizant of what people want to do, but we also have to realize, is there actual business use for this role?
Right.
So we are wrapping up on our time right now. We're almost at time, and Robert,
Yeah.
I absolutely enjoyed our conversation today. It was a ton of fun. I
Yeah,
have one
likewise.
last question for you, and this is something I ask every support leader that comes on to the show, or actually everyone that comes on the show. I say support isn't just a job, support is a mindset. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And I would, first of all, my initial reaction is that I absolutely agree with that. Um, there are a few things in an organization that I think everyone should be, number one, support oriented. And what I mean by that is putting the customer first, thinking about the customer. Um, one team that I would add to that is also sales. Like, if you're a salesperson or a sales leader, you should also think about, what does a customer want, and have that support mentality in some sense. Um, but also vice versa. Like, there are a few things that we as support professionals should think about. Um, what are other teams doing? Why are they doing it? And how can I have that mentality, or should I have that mentality as well? Um, so everyone should kind of have that support mentality, because we're not only interacting with customers on a day-to-day basis, but even if you are not, you're touching something that customers will be interacting with on a day-to-day basis. Um, and support, in my opinion, is something that should, at an end goal, ideally reduce the likelihood of someone actually reaching out. So how do we do that as a team? How do we do that as a company? And the reason that that's important is because if someone's not reaching out to your support team, it's because they're having such a great experience in the product or the service that you're offering that they don't need to. They're doing what they need to do, and they're moving on with their day. So having that mentality, I think it's going to drive tremendous business growth. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but that's kind of the tangent that I went off of there.
I think it does. Everyone's answer is a little different, and that's why I like asking it, because it's not something that you can just give a quick answer to right away. Well,
Yeah,
Robert, it was an absolute pleasure having you on and sharing this conversation with you, and I hope we can chat again in the future.
likewise. Great. Thanks for having me on this call. Really appreciate it.
All right, all right, bye, Robert.
Bye.
Well, it's not doing it. Oh.